James had always been the kind of guy who found comfort in solitude. After all, as an experienced space explorer, he had spent countless nights camping alone on various planets. There was something peaceful about the quiet of the unknown, the way the stars lit up the night sky without any distractions. Tonight was supposed to be no different. He had set up camp on a remote hillside on a newly discovered planet, a lush, tropical landscape. The air was warm, carrying the scent of unfamiliar plants, and the distant sound of alien creatures echoed through the trees. It was the perfect place to set up his tent, stretch out, and just breathe. He couldn't have asked for a more serene place to get some rest. As he lay there in his sleeping bag, staring up at the canopy of stars through the mesh top of his tent, he tried to focus on the peaceful silence. But then, as if out of nowhere, a strange, ethereal glow surrounded him. At first, he thought it might just be the reflection of a nearby plant, some bioluminescent species, but the glow was far too intense to be natural. It wasn't the soft, ambient light he had come to expect from alien plants. It was almost alive. James rolled over in his sleeping bag, trying to ignore the weird feeling creeping over him. "It's probably just some weird space phenomena," he muttered to himself, pulling the covers over his head. He figured it would fade by morning, like everything else had. But the glow didn't fade. Instead, it grew brighter, pulsing in rhythmic waves. At this point, his curiosity got the better of him. Slowly, he unzipped his sleeping bag and poked his head out of the tent, squinting into the night. The first thing he saw was a shape, tall, curvaceous, almost glowing in the dark. His eyes widened as a woman emerged from the tent. A gorgeous, alien woman. Her height alone was enough to make him feel small. She was almost otherworldly, with a smooth, glowing skin tone that shimmered in the light of the unknown source. Her features were a mix of familiar and alien, pointed ears, sharp features, and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through him. James blinked in disbelief. What the hell? The alien woman brushed some dirt off her body with an almost casual gesture, as if stepping out of a tent in the middle of nowhere was an entirely normal thing. Her movements were fluid, almost too perfect. She looked around, clearly disoriented, as though she had no idea where she was. Hey there?" James stammered, unsure if he was still dreaming or if this was some sort of hallucination. She turned to face him, and her eyes locked with his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a quizzical expression, she spoke, her voice melodic and smooth. "This is your space?" James's brain stuttered for a moment. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to be annoyed or completely stunned. She was beautiful, radiantly so, but at that moment, all he could focus on was the fact that she had just crawled out of his tent like it was a normal thing to do. Yeah?" he replied, trying to act cool, even though he had no idea what was happening. "It's my tent, and well, that's my space, I guess." The alien woman seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding slightly. "It's very confined," she said, almost like she was analyzing the structure of the tent itself. James tried to collect himself, even though his mind was racing. "I mean, yeah. It's not exactly a mansion, but it gets the job done." She nodded again, this time with more intensity, as if she was truly interested in his explanation. "I like it. It feels cozy." She said the last word like she had just learned it from some kind of dictionary. He was still processing everything that was happening. Gorgeous alien woman, check. Crawling out of his tent, check. Saying things that sounded like she was straight out of a sci-fi manual, check. "Okay, let's just take a step back here," he began, rubbing his forehead. "How did you get in here? And I mean, who are you?" She took a step closer, and James immediately noticed how perfect her features were. Her skin shimmered with a strange, otherworldly glow, and the soft outline of her muscles beneath her suit seemed too fluid, too graceful for anything human. He had never seen anything like it before. "I am Zara," she said, introducing herself like it was the most casual thing in the world. "I came through the light. It led me to you." "The light, right?" James muttered, trying to make sense of it all. He had been on plenty of planets before, but nothing had ever been this strange. He had learned to deal with alien wildlife, and sometimes bizarre environments, but this was beyond anything in his experience. Well, Zara, I don't know what's going on, but this is my personal space, he said, doing his best to keep his voice calm despite the whirlwind of confusion in his head. You can't just pop in like that. Zara tilted her head. Pop in? But I didn't make a popping sound. I simply emerged from the light. James stared at her for a moment, trying to figure out whether this was a prank, a misunderstanding, or something else entirely. But Zara seemed so calm, so genuine in her curiosity. She didn't seem threatening, just confused. Well, yeah, I guess you did, he said, suddenly feeling uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was going. But you're, in my tent. My private space. So maybe you could. I don't know, explain what you're doing here. Zara didn't seem fazed by his unease. In fact, she seemed more intrigued by his reaction than anything else. You are very small, she remarked, looking at him with a kind of detached curiosity. Your space is small as well. James couldn't help but chuckle, though his cheeks burned with embarrassment. Thanks, I guess? Your human form is different, she continued, moving closer now. James shifted uncomfortably but couldn't seem to move back. Zara was too graceful, too composed. It felt like she was effortlessly taking up all the space around him. How do you interact with other humans? It was then that James realized Zara might be entirely unfamiliar with human social norms. The realization made him nervous. We talk? Socialize? Have relationships? There are a lot of things we do, but I'm not sure what you mean. Zara's eyes narrowed slightly, as if the concept of human interaction was something she couldn't quite grasp. But how do you attract others? She asked, her tone casual but laced with genuine curiosity. James stammered, trying to find the right words, feeling his awkwardness grow by the second. Attract? Well, people usually like each other. You know, feel things for each other? Zara's eyes sparkled with understanding, or maybe it was amusement. So you mean, when you get close, you want to feel this? She gestured toward him, making a motion that could only be interpreted as a little too forward. James's face turned bright red. That's personal, he mumbled, trying to back up but feeling as though he was stuck. There was something about her that made it impossible to act normal. Zara didn't seem to notice his discomfort at all. Instead, she was all smiles, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that was far too direct. I do not understand. But you humans seem so interesting, she said, her voice dripping with both curiosity and a hint of amusement. James, for all his awkwardness, couldn't help but laugh a little. There was something oddly endearing about Zara's bluntness. Even if he wasn't sure what to make of her, there was no denying she was captivating. Well, Zara, maybe we should start with the basics of human interaction, he said, trying to take control of the situation, though he wasn't sure how it would play out. But somehow, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to be a simple conversation at all. Perhaps, she replied, her eyes twinkling with a mischief James hadn't expected. And just like that, everything about his quiet night in the wilderness was about to change forever. Zara's curiosity had no limits. That much was clear from the moment she stepped out of the tent. Now, as she leaned in a little too close, staring at James like he was some kind of fascinating specimen, he found himself at a complete loss for words. He had spent countless hours preparing for alien encounters, but none of his training had prepared him for this. So, she began, completely unfazed by the awkwardness in the air. You said you have relationships, but how do you choose your partner? James felt his mouth go dry. Well, it's kind of complicated, he stammered. People meet, get to know each other, and decide if they want to be together. Zara tilted her head as though she was trying to process the information, her gaze lingering on him for far too long. So, you have to decide? You don't just pick someone and make them yours? She asked the last part with such innocent sincerity that James almost choked. No! It's not like that! He felt his face burn with embarrassment. It's about mutual feelings, respect, and boundaries. He was practically waving his hands in the air, trying to emphasize the importance of respect, but Zara didn't seem to be following his explanation. I see, Zara said, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. So when you are close to someone, you do not take them? You do not control them? James blinked, not quite sure how to respond. What? No. It's not like that at all. We don't take people. That's not how it works. Zara's confusion only seemed to deepen. But you said that humans feel something when they get close. Isn't that a kind of control? She asked, as if she were piecing together the puzzle of human emotions in real time. No! James almost shouted, his mind racing as he tried to explain the complexities of human relationships. It's not about control. It's about consent. You have to respect the other person's feelings. Consent, Zara repeated, rolling the word around on her tongue like she was tasting something new. And how do you know if they consent? Do you ask? James's heart skipped a beat. Yes. Exactly. We ask or, we read the situation. We make sure it's mutual. Zara considered this for a moment before giving him a blank look. And how do you do that? How do you know if someone wants you to be close? James's mind blanked for a second. It's a feeling. It's about understanding each other. Communicating. Ah, Zara said, finally getting it, or so it seemed. So you just know. She smiled at him in a way that made James feel both confused and slightly uncomfortable. I mean, yeah, you kind of feel it, James said, his voice shaky. It's a connection. She leaned closer, her gaze intense. And if you do not feel this connection, what happens? Well, nothing. You don't push it, and you move on. James explained, shifting uncomfortably under her gaze. I see, Zara said, but there was something about the way she said it that made James feel uneasy. It was as if she was processing more than just the words. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she gave him another once-over, like she was calculating something. James couldn't help but notice the way she was looking at him. It was unsettling but oddly magnetic. You humans, she said thoughtfully, you limit yourselves. You need to ask permission to read feelings. Why not just take what you want? James almost choked on his own spit. Take what you want. No, that's not how we work. You can't just take people's. Why not? Zara interrupted, a mischievous glint in her eyes. If I want something, I should just take it, shouldn't I? James's face was now a deep shade of red. That's not how it works, Zara. People have their own boundaries, okay? He was trying his best to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. There was something about her, something about the way she was acting, that was pushing all of his buttons. Zara took another step closer, her presence almost overwhelming. She seemed so comfortable in her own skin, her movements so graceful, it was as if she had no concept of personal space at all. James's heart raced. You have no limits, do you? Zara smirked, and the corners of her lips lifted just enough to show a hint of amusement. No limits, she said, her voice low and teasing. I do what I want when I want. James swallowed hard, his mind reeling. This was beyond anything he had imagined. He thought he could handle an alien encounter, but this? This was like nothing he'd ever experienced. Zara, listen, you can't just... He started, but she cut him off with a raised hand. You're uncomfortable, she observed, her tone almost too knowing. You're unsure how to handle me. James took a step back, trying to regain some sense of composure. I know, Look, you can't just walk up to people and start acting like this. Zara tilted her head, her piercing gaze never leaving his. Why not? It's what you want, isn't it? She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm, sending a jolt through his body. The touch was light, almost innocent, but it felt so wrong in that moment. "No! That's not what I want!" James blurted out, feeling his heart race even faster. "I'm not ready for this. This is too much." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes studying him with that same unwavering intensity. Then, slowly, she withdrew her hand, the smile still playing on her lips. "Too much?" she repeated softly. "But you're the one who invited me into your tent." James took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I didn't invite you in here, Zara. You just showed up. I don't know what's going on, and I don't know how to deal with you." "Deal with me?" Zara repeated, her voice slightly amused. "But I'm not like you. I'm not complicated." James opened his mouth to protest, but he was too stunned to respond. How was he supposed to explain that her idea of simple was way too far outside his comfort zone? "I'm not complicated," she repeated, her voice softer now. "But you are." James blinked. What was she even talking about? "I'm complicated?" "Yes," she said, smiling slightly. "You humans, always holding back, always second-guessing. You're afraid to just take what you want." She reached out, touching his shoulder again, her fingers lightly grazing his skin. James couldn't help it. He stepped back again, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. This was escalating far too quickly. "I don't want you to take anything from me, Zara. I just want some space. Some time to figure this out." Zara looked at him for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. Then, finally, she stepped back. "I understand," she said softly. "But remember, you invited me into your tent. And now you're stuck with me." James's mind raced, but his heart was pounding in his chest. He didn't know what he was supposed to feel right now: fear, excitement, confusion. All he knew was that this alien woman was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was fearless, relentless, and completely outside of his understanding. And somehow, that made her even more irresistible. James had thought he'd seen it all in his years of space exploration. He had encountered strange landscapes, bizarre creatures, and even a few hostile entities. But nothing could have prepared him for Zara. Her presence was overwhelming, her confidence, her unfamiliarity with human social norms, and her blatant disregard for personal boundaries were all things he had never encountered. She was a force of nature, and it seemed like the universe had conspired to put them together in this ridiculous situation. For the last few minutes, James had been standing there, trying to regain his composure, but it was hard with Zara's gaze locked onto him. Her confidence was almost maddening, and the worst part was that he couldn't figure out if she was playing with him, or if she genuinely didn't understand the concept of personal space. Either way, it was making him more uncomfortable than he cared to admit. "So," Zara said, breaking the silence with her usual air of calm curiosity. "You said humans have boundaries, but you haven't explained what that means. How do you stop yourself from taking things?" James winced at her phrasing. It wasn't just that her words were making his skin prickle with discomfort. It was the fact that she had a way of making everything sound so blunt and stripped of the layers of societal norms humans usually wrapped around their thoughts. The way she asked things made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, she didn't know how much trouble she was causing with her straightforwardness. "Well, it's about respect," James began, his voice sounding less certain as he spoke. "It's about understanding that other people have their own wants and needs, and you can't just take things from them. You have to ask. Make sure they're comfortable with whatever happens." Zara was silent for a moment, considering his words. Then she spoke again, her voice laced with both curiosity and a hint of mischief. "But why wait? If you feel something, shouldn't you just act on it?" James wasn't sure whether he should laugh or scream. "It's not that simple, Zara," he said, running a hand through his hair, trying to remain calm. "You can't just act on every feeling you have. You have to make sure the other person feels the same way." "But what if they don't?" Zara asked, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was dissecting the very concept. "What happens then?" James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Then you respect their decision and move on." You don't force anything. Zara tilted her head. And what if they're afraid? What if they don't know what they want? James blinked, not sure what to make of her question. Well, that's why communication is important, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. You talk, you understand each other, and you make sure everyone is on the same page. Zara didn't seem convinced. And if they don't understand? She pressed, stepping a little closer to him. What if they're confused, like I am? James swallowed. He had no idea how to handle this. Then you help them, he said, his voice softer now. You explain. You listen. There was a long pause before Zara spoke again, her voice almost gentle, but still carrying the same intensity. I don't understand, James. I don't understand why humans have to hold back. If you want something, why not just take it? Why not take what you want without worrying about boundaries? James's heart skipped a beat. Because, he began slowly, trying to formulate his thoughts. People are not objects to be taken. You can't just take someone's feelings or body or trust. It has to be earned. You have to respect them as people, not possessions. Zara stared at him, her expression unreadable. But I don't think you understand, she said, her voice dropping a notch. I don't take things because I think of them as objects. I take them because I want them. And I know what I want. James could feel the weight of her gaze pressing into him. Her words made his chest tighten, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she was talking about him or just the idea of human relationships in general. There was a strange vulnerability behind her certainty, something raw and unguarded that made him both uncomfortable and strangely drawn to her. Zara, he began, but his voice trailed off as she took another step forward. She was so close now that he could feel the heat radiating off her. Her scent was unlike anything he had experienced, sweet, exotic, with an underlying hint of something wild. James's mind raced as he tried to keep his composure. He had to stay in control of the situation, but it was getting harder with every passing second. Zara looked up at him with a slight tilt of her head, her eyes never leaving his. James, she said softly, her tone changing. You're not like other humans. He wasn't sure what to say to that. I don't know what that means, he replied, his voice barely a whisper. Zara smiled, a small, knowing smile that made his heart race even faster. You think too much, she said, her voice almost playful. You think you can control everything. But sometimes you just have to let go. Just feel. And with that, Zara's hand reached out, brushing his arm lightly. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through his body, and for a split second, James forgot everything. He forgot about his awkwardness, his discomfort, his need for control. All he could focus on was the way she was looking at him, like she saw through all his defenses, like she knew exactly how to push his buttons. Zara, I don't know what you want from me, James finally said, his voice thick with emotion. What I want, Zara said softly, her voice almost a whisper, is for you to stop holding back. You don't need to figure me out. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to feel. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had spent so much time trying to understand her, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions and confusion she had brought into his life. But now, standing here, so close to her, all he wanted to do was feel. But could he? Could he throw all his reservations aside and let himself fall into whatever this was between them? Was it even possible for him to let go, to not worry about boundaries, about right and wrong, about consent? Zara's hand lingered on his arm, her touch soft but insistent. You're afraid, James, she whispered, her voice low and seductive. You're afraid of what might happen if you let go. James didn't know how to respond to that. He didn't know if he should pull away, push her back, or let himself give in. His heart was racing, and his mind was a blur of emotions. He had always prided himself on being the level-headed one, the one who could handle any situation. But now, with Zara standing so close, with her gaze so intense, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. You're right, he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible. I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. Zara smiled, a soft, almost understanding smile. Then let me help you, James, she said, her voice like a gentle caress. Let me show you what it means to just feel. And for the first time in his life, James didn't know if he should run or stay. James stood there, frozen. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. The way Zara was looking at him, her eyes dark with something he couldn't quite understand, was making it nearly impossible to think straight. The simple act of her touching his arm had shattered all the control he had over his emotions, and now all he could feel was the heat of her presence, the overwhelming intensity of her gaze. He wanted to step back, to create some distance, but his body refused to cooperate. His feet were rooted to the ground, and his mind was consumed by the whirlwind of confusion swirling around him. He had told himself, repeatedly, that he wasn't here for anything beyond the mission, that he wasn't going to let anything distract him. But here he was, standing with an alien woman who had no boundaries, no concept of personal space, and absolutely no hesitation in getting under his skin. I'm not like other humans, Zara had said, and he had no idea if that was a compliment or an insult. All he knew was that she was right. He wasn't handling this situation like he should. He wasn't thinking about the mission or about his responsibilities. All he could think about was her touch, her confidence, her intensity. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to deal with it. What do you want from me, Zara? James finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Zara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence overwhelming him completely. I want you to stop resisting, she said softly, her voice like silk. I want you to stop pretending that you're not feeling what's happening right now. James opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He couldn't lie. He was feeling something powerful, something that terrified him. It was a mixture of desire and fear, of wanting to understand her and wanting to push her away all at once. You're afraid, Zara said, her voice low and almost soothing. Afraid of what might happen if you let go. Afraid of what you might discover about yourself. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. I'm not afraid, he said, though the words sounded weak, even to him. I don't know how to handle this. Zara reached out again, her fingers brushing against his chest. You don't have to handle anything, she said, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. You just have to feel. Her touch was soft, but it was enough to make his breath catch in his throat. She was too close, too overwhelming, and yet he couldn't bring himself to pull away. There was something about her, something about the way she looked at him like she knew exactly how to break down his walls, that made him feel exposed. Vulnerable. I don't know what you want from me, James repeated, his voice barely more than a whisper. I don't know how to deal with you. Zara smiled, the expression almost teasing. You don't have to deal with me, she said. You just have to let me show you how it feels to stop holding back. To stop thinking and just feel. Her words were like a siren's call, pulling him in, making him want to give in to the temptation she represented. His mind screamed at him to stop, to walk away, but his body refused to listen. Every part of him wanted to stay. Wanted to understand what she was offering, even if it meant letting go of everything he thought he knew about relationships, boundaries, and control. I can't, he said, the words barely escaping his lips. I can't just forget everything. I can't just be with you like this. Zara's smile softened, and she took another step closer, her breath warm against his skin. You're not forgetting anything, she whispered. You're just feeling. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the confusion, the reservations, everything faded away as Zara's presence consumed him. Her touch, her voice, her entire being, it was as if she had become the only thing that mattered. The only thing he could focus on. I don't know what's happening, James said, his voice shaky. But I can't stop it. Zara looked at him, her eyes softening with what almost seemed like understanding. "You don't have to stop it, James," she said gently. "You just have to embrace it. Let go. Let yourself feel everything." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. And for a brief moment, James thought he could do it. He thought he could let go of his fears, his hesitations, and just feel. But then the reality of the situation hit him. This wasn't just about giving in to temptation. It wasn't just about Zara and her alien confidence. It was about him, about who he was and what he was willing to risk. "I'm not ready for this," James said, his voice cracking with the weight of his uncertainty. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to just feel." Zara tilted her head, studying him with those piercing eyes. "But you want to," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You want to let go. You want to feel something real. Something more." James opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. How could he deny it? How could he deny the pull he felt toward her, the desire to abandon his reservations and just give in? It was there, in every glance, in every word she spoke. It was undeniable. I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a gentleness in her eyes. "You don't have to do anything," she said, her voice soothing. "You just have to let me help you. Let me show you what it feels like to feel." Her words were like a balm, soothing his doubts and fears, but they also sparked something deep inside him, a longing, a need he hadn't fully understood until now. He wasn't sure where this was leading, or if he even wanted to know, but for the first time, he felt the walls he had spent years building around himself begin to crumble. "I don't know if I can," James said, his voice barely audible. "You can," Zara said softly. "You can, because you want to. I know you do." And in that moment, James realized that Zara wasn't just pushing him to feel something. She was offering him an escape, a way to release all the fears and doubts that had held him back for so long. But whether he was ready for that kind of freedom was something he couldn't answer just yet. As Zara stepped back slightly, giving him space to think, James stood there, torn between the need to protect himself and the irresistible pull to let go and embrace whatever this was. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: everything had changed. And whatever he chose, he couldn't go back to the way things were before.